For generations, the galaxy had basked in an era of unparalleled peace. The great empires that had once warred with one another now coexisted in a fragile harmony, bound by complex webs of trade agreements, diplomatic treaties, and mutual defense pacts. Humanity, having survived the cataclysmic wars that had nearly torn their young interstellar civilization apart, had emerged as a respected member of the galactic community, their colonies and outposts dotting the stars, their explorers and merchants venturing forth to the furthest reaches of known space. But in the darkness between the stars, a new power was stirring. The Kyloth Dominion, a ruthless empire of conquest and subjugation, had long cast a wary eye upon the Terran Confederacy, the last great bastion of human influence and independence in the galaxy. For decades, the Kyloth had been amassing their forces, building a war machine of unprecedented scale and technological sophistication. Their ultimate goal was the complete annihilation of the Terran Confederacy and the assimilation of humanity into the Dominion's vast authoritarian holdings. On the Terran colony world of Veritas, Dr. Sarah Johnson, a brilliant xenobiologist and trusted advisor to the Confederacy's High Council, pored over the latest intelligence reports with a growing sense of dread. The data was clear. The Kyloth Dominion was mobilizing its forces for a massive, unprovoked assault. Their fleets were already en route, their warships bristling with devastating plasma cannons, particle beam emitters, and missile batteries capable of reducing entire cities to rubble. "This is worse than we feared," Sarah murmured, her brow furrowed with concern as she reviewed the schematics of the Kyloth's newest capital ships. "Their technology has advanced far beyond our own. If they reach Terran space, we may not be able to withstand the onslaught." Across the galaxy, on the bustling spaceport of Eridani Prime, the mood was equally somber. Traders, merchants, and travelers from a dozen worlds had heard the whispers of the impending Kyloth invasion, and a palpable sense of unease hung in the air. Many had already begun making preparations to flee the Confederacy's core worlds, fearing that the coming conflict would engulf the entire sector. "I'm telling you, it's time to get out of here while we still can," a grizzled freighter captain said gruffly to his crew, as they loaded the last of their cargo onto the aging but sturdy vessel. "The Kyloth are coming, and they ain't gonna be satisfied until they've wiped every last trace of the Confederacy off the galactic map." Sarah Johnson, her mind racing with contingency plans and military strategies, hurried through the crowded spaceport, dodging throngs of panicked civilians. She needed to reach the Confederacy's capital on Argus Prime as soon as possible. The High Council had to be made aware of the full scope of the Kyloth threat. If they did not act quickly, the very future of humanity and the stars could be at stake. As she boarded her shuttle, Sarah cast a final, worried glance out the viewports at the bustling activity below. Eridani Prime was just one of countless colony worlds that dotted the Confederacy's holdings, a vibrant, thriving hub of commerce and culture. But for how long? If the Kyloth were successful in their invasion, all of this could be reduced to smoldering ruins, the proud legacy of humanity's interstellar expansion snuffed out in a matter of weeks. "Hold on, Confederacy," Sarah murmured, her jaw set with determination. "We'll do whatever it takes to protect our home." The shuttle's engines roared to life, and Sarah felt the familiar lurch of acceleration as the small craft surged upwards, leaving the bustling spaceport behind. Below, the once verdant surface of Eridani Prime was already blanketed in a haze of smoke and dust, a grim portent of the devastation to come. The journey to Argus Prime was a tense and anxious one for Dr. Sarah Johnson. As her shuttle pierced the upper atmosphere and made the jump to faster-than-light travel, she pored over the latest intelligence reports, her mind racing with calculations and contingency plans. The data was clear. The Kyloth Dominion's invasion fleet was unlike anything the Terran Confederacy had ever faced. Tens of thousands of capital ships, supported by legions of smaller escort craft and fighter squadrons, were converging on the outer colonies, systematically overwhelming the Confederacy's outmatched defenses. Already, several key worlds had fallen, their populations either conscripted into the Dominion's slave labor camps or simply annihilated outright. Sarah clenched her fist, her knuckles whitening with the intensity of her grip. She had dedicated her life to the service of the Confederacy, working tirelessly as both a scientist and a diplomat to foster cooperation and understanding between humanity and its galactic neighbors. To see all of that hard-won progress now hanging by a thread was a bitter, agonizing prospect. As the shuttle touched down on the landing pad of the Confederacy Capitol building, Sarah hurried through the bustling corridors, dodging harried aides and security personnel. She had to reach the High Council chamber immediately. Every second wasted could mean the difference between victory and annihilation for the Terran Confederacy. The chamber doors parted with a hiss, and Sarah strode into the vast, circular room, its towering vaulted ceilings and gleaming marble floors a testament to the Confederacy's enduring power and influence. Seated around the curved, horseshoe-shaped table were the members of the High Council, a collection of the Confederacy's most respected and influential leaders, each bearing the weight of their responsibilities etched into their weathered faces. At the center of the table sat Alec Rains, the Confederacy's president and the de facto leader of humanity's interstellar holdings. As Sarah approached, his piercing gaze met hers, and she could see the deep lines of worry that had formed on his brow. "Dr. Johnson," he said, his voice grave. "You have news, I take it?" Sarah nodded solemnly. "Mr. President, the situation is dire. The Kyloff Dominion's invasion fleet is already en route to our core worlds. Their forces are unlike anything we've ever faced. Advanced warships, devastating armaments, and sheer numbers that dwarf our own military capabilities. If they reach Terran space, we may not be able to stop them." A heavy silence fell over the chamber as the council members absorbed Sarah's words. Finally, President Rains spoke again, his tone laced with a mixture of resignation and steely determination. "Then we have no choice. We must seek outside assistance. Our only hope lies in contacting the Dreadnought fleets of Earth." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine at the mention of the Dreadnoughts. The mighty godlike warships of humanity's past had not been seen in active service for centuries, their crews and pilots having long since faded into legend. To call upon them now would be an act of desperation, a last-ditch gamble that could either save the Confederacy or spell its ultimate doom. "Mr. President, the Dreadnoughts have been dormant for generations," she said, a note of hesitation in her voice. "Their crews, their technologies, we don't even know if they're still operational. And the Dreadnoughts themselves, they're relics of a bygone era. What if they're not enough to turn the tide against the Kyloff?" Rains held up a hand, silencing her. "We have no other choice, Dr. Johnson. The Confederacy's very existence hangs in the balance. If we don't act now, our species may never recover from the Kyloff's wrath." He turned to the assembled council members, his gaze sweeping across their solemn faces. "Prepare the fastest ships in our fleet. We must send a diplomatic envoy to Earth immediately, bearing a plea for aid. The fate of our people rests on their response." Sarah felt a surge of both hope and trepidation. The Dreadnoughts represented humanity's last, best chance at survival against the Kyloff onslaught. But could these ancient, dormant warships truly be roused in time to turn the tide of the coming invasion? As she hurried from the council chamber, the weight of the decision settled heavily upon her shoulders. The future of the Terran Confederacy, and perhaps all of humanity, now hung in the balance. For centuries, the mighty Dreadnought warships of humanity had slumbered, their godlike technologies and devastating armaments untouched and forgotten by all but the most ardent historians and scholars. These colossal vessels, relics of a bygone era when humanity had reached for the stars with unbridled ambition and a thirst for conquest, had once been the pride and terror of the galaxy. But as the great interstellar empires rose and fell, the Dreadnoughts had been relegated to the pages of history, their crews and pilots passing into legend. Now, as the Terran Confederacy faced its darkest hour, the call had gone out once more for the Dreadnoughts to awaken from their long slumber. The diplomatic envoy, led by President Rains himself, had made the perilous journey to Earth, traversing the vast, uncharted expanse between the Confederacy's core worlds and the ancestral home of humanity. Their mission was clear: to plead for the aid of the Dreadnoughts, to beg their ancient rivals to take up arms once more in defense of their species. The journey was fraught with danger, as the Kyloth invasion force had already begun to encroach upon the outer colonies of the Confederacy. Time was of the essence, and the envoy raced against the clock, their ships pushing the limits of their engines as they hurtled towards Earth. At long last, the gleaming spires of humanity's homeworld came into view, the once bustling cities now eerily quiet and devoid of the vibrant activity that had once defined them. The envoy's ships landed at the sprawling Dreadnought yards, immense shipyards that had fallen silent for generations. As President Rains and his team disembarked, an uneasy silence hung in the air, broken only by the distant hum of machinery and the occasional burst of static from long-dormant communication relays. It was Dr. Sarah Johnson who first noticed the subtle movements in the distance, a shift in the shadows cast by the massive, looming forms of the Dreadnoughts themselves. Squinting against the glare of the sun, she caught a glimpse of movement, the hatch of a command tower opening, the emergence of a figure clad in a familiar uniform. "Look," she exclaimed, pointing towards the nearest Dreadnought. "They're stirring." One by one, the ancient warships began to come alive, their hulls shuddering as long-dormant systems were reactivated. Crew members, their features weathered by time and experience, emerged from the bowels of the vessels, their eyes alight with a renewed sense of purpose. President Rains stepped forward, his voice carrying an air of reverence and urgency. "People of Earth, we come before you, the last remnants of the Terran Confederacy, to beseech you for aid. Our worlds are under siege, our defenses crumbling in the face of the Kyloth Dominion's relentless onslaught. We have come to you, the guardians of humanity's legacy, to ask that you take up arms once more and join us in this fight for our very survival." A hush fell over the assembled crew members, their expressions a mix of uncertainty and resolve. Then, from the command tower of the closest Dreadnought, a figure emerged, a tall, imposing man with a weathered face and eyes that burned with a fierce determination. "President Rains," the man said, his voice rich with a timbre that spoke of decades spent commanding the most powerful warships in the known galaxy. "You have come to the right place. The Dreadnoughts of Earth have slumbered too long, while our kin have faced the ravages of war. No more. We will answer your call, and together we will stand against the Kyloth Dominion, and we will triumph." A thunderous cheer arose up from the Dreadnought crews, their fists pumping the air in a display of unbridled enthusiasm. The ancient warships, once relegated to the annals of history, were now stirring to life, their mighty engines rumbling to wakefulness as they prepared to embark on a journey that would decide the fate of the galaxy. Sarah Johnson felt a surge of hope and pride swell within her chest. The Dreadnoughts were awakening, their crews readying themselves for a fight unlike any they had seen in generations. If anyone could turn the tide against the Kyloth onslaught, it would be these legendary vessels and the seasoned veterans who commanded them. As the Dreadnoughts began to power up, their ion drives flaring to life, Sarah knew that the galaxy was about to witness the return of humanity's most formidable champions. The day of reckoning was at hand, and the Terran Confederacy would not face it alone. The vast expanse of space between Earth and the besieged core worlds of the Terran Confederacy was traversed with unprecedented speed as the Dreadnought fleets surged forth, their massive hulls bristling with the most devastating armaments humanity had ever conceived. At the forefront of the Dreadnought Armada was the flagship, the TCS Imperium, its towering silhouette casting an imposing shadow over the smaller escort vessels that flanked it. Aboard the Imperium's bridge, President Rains stood alongside the battle-hardened crew, his expression grim but resolute. "We are nearing the primary engagement zone," came the voice of the Imperium's captain, a seasoned veteran named Thomas Varga. The Kyla fleet has already begun its assault on the Confederacy's outer colonies. We must move quickly if we are to have any hope of turning the tide. Rains nodded, his eyes fixed on the tactical display that dominated the center of the bridge. Swarms of Kyloth warships, their sleek, angular hulls gleaming with energy, were converging on the Confederacy's outermost settlements, bombarding them with devastating salvos of plasma and particle beam fire. "Signal the rest of the fleet," Rains commanded, his voice carrying a weight of authority forged through decades of political leadership. "Prepare for immediate engagement. We cannot allow the Kyloth to advance any further into Terran space." Moments later, the Dreadnought armada emerged from the void, its massive vessels dwarfing even the largest of the Kyloth capital ships. The two fleets collided in a titanic clash, the very fabric of space and time shuddering under the extraordinary energies unleashed. Plasma cannons thundered, their brilliant bolts of superheated energy carving through the enemy's shields and armor with ease. Particle beams lanced out, their coherent streams of subatomic particles slicing clean through the hulls of Kyloth warships, sending them spiraling into oblivion. Missile batteries unleashed a hail of warheads, their intelligent targeting systems identifying and eliminating even the smallest enemy fighters with ruthless precision. The Kyloth, for all their technological might, were quickly overwhelmed by the sheer devastating firepower of the Dreadnoughts. Their formations broke apart, their once disciplined tactics devolving into a desperate scramble for survival as the ancient human warships advanced relentlessly. Aboard the Imperium, Rains watched the unfolding battle with a mixture of relief and trepidation. The Dreadnoughts were indeed living up to their fearsome reputation, but he knew that the true test was yet to come. The Kyloth Dominion had amassed a truly staggering armada, and as the Confederacy's forces fell back, the enemy's main fleet began to emerge from the depths of the void. "My God," Varga murmured, his eyes widening as the sheer scale of the Kyloth's forces became apparent. "They've committed their entire invasion force. This is going to be a fight to the bitter end." Rains clenched his fists, his knuckles turning white with the intensity of his grip. "Then so be it. Signal the rest of the fleet. We hold nothing back. Today, we stand or fall as one." The Dreadnoughts surged forward, their devastating arsenal unleashed with renewed fury as they met the full brunt of the Kyloth onslaught. The very fabric of space seemed to tremble under the weight of the cataclysmic clash as the two most powerful military forces in the galaxy engaged in a battle that would determine the fate of an entire civilization. Aboard the Imperium, Sarah Johnson watched the unfolding chaos with a mixture of awe and trepidation. She had seen the Dreadnoughts in action before, during the Grand Fleet reviews that had once been a hallmark of Terran Confederacy celebrations, but nothing could have prepared her for the sheer scale and ferocity of this engagement. "This is madness," she whispered, her gaze fixed on the flickering tactical display as it registered the staggering casualties on both sides. "If we don't turn the tide soon, there may not be enough of the Confederacy left to save." The battle raged on, the vastness of space lit by the brilliant flashes of energy weapons and the thunderous detonations of missile strikes. For every Kyloth warship that fell, it seemed two more took its place, the enemy's relentless determination fueled by their own thirst for conquest and the subjugation of humanity. But the Dreadnoughts, for all their age and seeming obsolescence, refused to be cowed. Their crews, hardened by generations of service and the toughest training regimens humanity had ever devised, fought with a fury and determination that belied their years. They knew that the fate of their species hung in the balance, and they would not, could not, falter. As the battle reached its crescendo, Sarah Johnson steeled herself, her mind racing with calculations and tactical scenarios. If the Dreadnoughts were to prevail, it would take everything they had, and more. The very future of the Terran Confederacy, and perhaps all of humanity, now rested on the shoulders of these ancient, indomitable warships. Despite the overwhelming numerical superiority of the Kyloth invasion force, the sheer technological might, and unbridled ferocity of the dreadnoughts began to slowly turn the tide of the battle. One by one, the gleaming capital ships of the Dominion were torn apart, their hulls shredded by the relentless barrage of plasma, particle beam, and missile fire from the ancient human warships. Aboard the TCS Imperium, Sarah Johnson watched the unfolding carnage with a mixture of horror and growing hope. The dreadnoughts were living up to their fearsome reputation, their crews demonstrating a level of skill and discipline that seemed almost superhuman. But even as the Confederacy's forces pushed back the Kyloff onslaught, she knew that the true test was yet to come. "They're pulling back," Thomas Varga, the Imperium's seasoned captain, announced, his eyes narrowing as he studied the tactical display. "The Kyloff are consolidating their forces, regrouping for another assault." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "What are they planning?" Varga shook his head grimly. "I'm not sure, but it can't be good. They've taken heavy losses, but they're still pressing forward. It's as if they're willing to sacrifice everything to break through our lines." President Rains, who had been silently observing the battle from the Imperium's command deck, stepped forward, his expression grim but determined. "Then we must be ready to meet them," he said, his voice carrying a weight of authority that belied his years. "Signal the rest of the fleet. Redouble our efforts. Focus all firepower on the enemy's lead elements. We can't let them regroup and recover." The dreadnought crews, their faces etched with sweat and grime, obeyed the order without hesitation. Plasma cannons roared, particle beams lanced out, and missile batteries unleashed a seemingly endless torrent of ordnance upon the retreating Kyloff vessels. But as the dreadnoughts pressed their advantage, Sarah couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was amiss. The Kyloff, for all their brutality and disregard for their own lives, were not known for reckless tactics. Their military strategies were meticulously planned, their movements calculated with the precision of a well-oiled machine. "They're up to something," she murmured, her brow furrowed in concentration. "I can feel it." Varga glanced at her, his eyes narrowing. "What do you mean?" "I'm not sure," Sarah admitted, her gaze fixed on the tactical display. "But the Kyloff have never been this disorganized before. They're pulling back, yes, but it's almost as if they're baiting us." The captain's expression darkened as he considered her words. "You may be right. Warn the rest of the fleet. We need to be ready for anything." But even as the message was relayed, the Kyloff's true intentions became horrifyingly clear. With a blinding flash of light, the Dominion's capital ships unleashed a devastating barrage of concentrated energy, their combined firepower focused on a single critical point in the Dreadnought formation. The TCS Imperium, flagship of the human armada, shuddered under the incredible onslaught, its shields straining to withstand the relentless assault. Alarms blared, and Sarah felt her heart racing as she watched the tactical display register the rapidly deteriorating condition of the mighty vessel. "They're targeting the Imperium," Varga shouted, his hands flying across the controls as he desperately tried to realign the ship's defensive systems, all available power to forward shields. Rains gripped the edge of the tactical console, his knuckles turning white. "Hold fast, Captain. We cannot allow them to break our line." The Imperium rocked violently, its hull scarred by the intense barrage. Sarah braced herself against a bulkhead, her mind racing with a dozen contingency plans, each more desperate than the last. If the Imperium fell, the dreadnought fleets would be crippled, their momentum shattered. The fate of the Terran Confederacy, and perhaps all of humanity, now hung by a thread. As the Kyloff continued their onslaught, Sarah felt a surge of determination rise within her. She would not, allow the Imperium to be destroyed, not when the stakes were so high. Pushing past the panicked crew members, she rushed towards the communications console, her fingers flying across the controls as she frantically hailed the other dreadnoughts. "All vessels, converge on the Imperium's position," she shouted, her voice laced with urgency. "We must protect the flagship at all costs. The fate of the Confederacy depends on it. The response was instantaneous as the Dreadnought fleets shifted their focus, their devastating firepower converging on the Kyloth's concentrated assault. Like a swarm of angry hornets, the ancient human warships surged forward, their combined might enough to stagger even the mightiest of the Dominion's capital ships. Slowly but surely, the tide began to turn once more, the Kyloth's relentless onslaught faltering under the sheer intensity of the Dreadnought's counterattack. Sarah watched, her heart pounding, as the Imperium's shield stabilized, its battered hull weathering the assault. "We're holding them off," Varga announced, a note of cautious optimism in his voice. "But I don't know how much longer we can sustain this." Rains nodded, his gaze fixed on the tactical display. "Then we must make every shot count. Signal the rest of the fleet. Concentrate all firepower on the enemy's main force. We will not be broken." As the battle raged on, Sarah knew that the fate of the Terran Confederacy now rested in the hands of the Dreadnoughts. If they could not hold the line, then all would be lost. But in the face of such overwhelming adversity, she felt a renewed sense of hope, a belief that humanity, at its darkest hour, would find the strength to prevail. As the battle between the Dreadnoughts and the Kyloth Dominion's invasion force raged on, the stakes continued to rise with each passing minute. The Imperium, flagship of the human armada, had withstood the initial onslaught, but its shields were faltering, and the relentless barrage from the Kyloth capital ships was taking a heavy toll. Aboard the battered vessel, President Rains and his team of advisors huddled around the central tactical display, their expressions grim as they assessed the situation. "We're hemorrhaging ships faster than we can replace them," Thomas Varga, the Imperium's captain, reported. "Our losses are mounting, and the Kyloth shows no signs of retreating." Sarah Johnson, her eyes narrowed in concentration, studied the shifting patterns of the battle. "They're not just trying to break through our lines," she murmured, her voice tense with realization. "They're targeting the Imperium specifically. It's as if they know that destroying our flagship would cripple the entire Dreadnought fleet." Rains nodded, his jaw set with determination. "Then we must not allow that to happen. Captain Varga, redirect all available firepower to the Imperium's defense. We cannot afford to lose this ship." The captain saluted sharply and relayed the orders, the Imperium's weapons systems redoubling their efforts to fend off the Kyloth's relentless assault. But even as the human vessels fought with unwavering courage, it became increasingly clear that they were facing an impossible task. The Kyloth forces, their ranks swelling with each passing moment as reinforcements poured in from the depths of the void, continued to advance, their combined firepower slowly but surely wearing down the Dreadnought's defenses. "We're barely holding them off," Varga reported, his face etched with tension. "At this rate, the Imperium won't be able to sustain its shields for much longer." Rains clenched his fist, his knuckles turning white. "Then we must consider alternative options. What if we—" He paused, his expression darkening as he contemplated the gravity of the decision before them. Sarah, sensing the president's hesitation, placed a hand on his arm. "Sir, whatever you're thinking, we need to act quickly. The Confederacy's fate hangs in the balance." Rains met her gaze, his eyes reflecting the weight of the burden he now carried. "Dr. Johnson, you're right. We have no choice." He turned to Varga, his voice firm and resolute. "Captain, ready the Imperium's emergency thrusters. We're going to make a final desperate push to cripple the Kyloth's flagship." Varga's eyes widened, the implications of the order not lost on him. "Mr. President, that would be a suicide run. The Imperium won't survive such an assault." "I know," Rains replied, his expression hardening. "But if we can take out the Kyloth's command and control, it may be enough to break their forces and turn the tide of the battle. It's a risk we have to take." Sarah felt her heart sinking as she realized the gravity of the president's plan. "Sir, is there no other way? Surely we can hold out long enough for reinforcements to arrive, or find a way to regroup and rally the other dreadnoughts." Rains shook his head, his expression etched with regret. "There is no time. Dr. Johnson. "The Kyloth will not relent, and the Confederacy's survival hangs by a thread. This is our only chance." He turned to the Imperium's crew, his gaze sweeping across their faces, many of them young and inexperienced, but all bearing the same steely determination that had defined humanity's spirit for generations. "My friends," he began, his voice carrying a weight of authority and conviction. "Today we face our greatest challenge, our most formidable foe. But we are not afraid, for we are the inheritors of a proud legacy, the guardians of humanity's future. The Kyloth may outnumber us, their weapons may be more advanced, but we have something they can never possess, the unbreakable will to survive." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crew, their expressions hardening with resolve. "So let us go forth and show the Kyloth the true might of the Terran Confederacy. Let us prove that the human spirit cannot be extinguished, no matter the odds. For today, we fight not just for ourselves, but for the very future of our species. Victory or death, there is no other choice." As the Imperium's engines roared to life, Sarah Johnson watched with a mixture of pride and trepidation. The fate of the Confederacy now rested on the shoulders of this ancient, battered vessel and its courageous crew. If they failed, there may be no one left to carry on the fight. But if they succeeded, it would be a turning point in the war, a moment that would be remembered for generations to come. With a final glance at the tactical display, Sarah steeled herself for the coming onslaught. The Kyloth had made a fatal mistake in underestimating the resolve of the human spirit, and now they would pay the ultimate price. As the mighty TCS Imperium surged forward, its engines straining at the limits of their capabilities, the rest of the Dreadnought fleet rallied to its defense. Plasma cannons thundered, particle beams lanced out, and missile batteries unleashed a relentless barrage of ordnance, all focused on the Kyloth's flagship and its surrounding escort vessels. The Imperium, its battered hull etched with scars from the previous onslaught, hurtled towards its target, its powerful thrusters propelling it with a speed that belied its massive size. Aboard the bridge, President Rains stood tall, his gaze fixed on the rapidly approaching Kyloth command ship. "All hands, brace for impact." Thomas Varga, the Imperium's captain, shouted, his voice carrying a note of grim determination. The Imperium slammed into the Kyloth flagship with a deafening crash, the force of the impact causing the ancient vessel to shudder and groan. Explosions ripped through the Dominion's capital ship, its shields collapsing under the sheer weight of the Imperium's assault. Sarah Johnson, her hands gripping the edge of the tactical console, watched the unfolding carnage with a mixture of horror and disbelief. The Imperium, once a symbol of the Confederacy's might, was now a battering ram, its crew sacrificing themselves to deliver a decisive blow against the enemy. "They're not stopping," she whispered, her voice trembling. "They're going to destroy the Imperium." Rains, his face etched with a mixture of grief and resolve, turned to her, his eyes reflecting the weight of the decision he had made. "They know what's at stake, Dr. Johnson. Their sacrifice will not be in vain." The Imperium, its hull crumbling under the strain, continued to plow forward, its weapon systems unleashing a final devastating salvo that tore through the Kyloth flagship's defenses. The massive vessel shuddered, its energy systems overloading, and with a blinding flash, it erupted into a cataclysmic explosion that sent shockwaves rippling through the surrounding space. In the wake of the Imperium's sacrifice, the Dreadnought fleets surged forward, their combined firepower focused on the now disorganized Kyloth forces. Caught off guard by the sudden loss of their command ship, the Dominion's warships began to falter, their formations breaking apart as they scrambled to regroup. "They're in disarray," Varga shouted, his voice tinged with a mixture of triumph and sorrow. "Press the attack, all vessels. We must seize this opportunity." The Dreadnoughts, their crews now fueled by a renewed sense of purpose, unleashed a devastating barrage upon the Kyloth armada. Plasma bolts and particle beams sliced through the enemy's weakened shields, and missile after missile found its mark, sending Dominion ships spiraling into oblivion. Sarah watched the unfolding chaos, her heart pounding with a mixture of relief and trepidation. The Dreadnoughts were finally turning the tide of the battle. But at what cost? The Imperium, the pride of the Confederacy, had been reduced to little more than a smoldering ruin, its brave crew sacrificed in a desperate gambit to cripple the Kyloth's command and control. As the battle raged on, the remaining Kyloth vessels began to retreat, their once formidable formation now in disarray. The Dreadnoughts, their firepower still blazing, pursued the fleeing enemy, determined to deliver a decisive blow that would shatter the Dominion's invasion force once and for all. Aboard the TCS Triton, one of the Dreadnought's most seasoned vessels, Captain Irina Volkov surveyed the devastation with a grim expression. "We've broken their back, but at a terrible price. The Imperium is gone, and with it, the heart of the Confederacy's defenses." Sarah, who had been monitoring the battle from the Triton's bridge, nodded solemnly. "The sacrifice of the Imperium's crew will not be forgotten. Their bravery has saved us all." Volkov turned to her eyes reflecting a mixture of pride and sorrow. "Indeed, but now we must focus on the task at hand. The Kyloth may be retreating, but they will not give up easily. We must push forward and ensure that their invasion force is utterly destroyed." As the Dreadnoughts continued their relentless pursuit, Sarah couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding. The victory, while hard-won, had come at a terrible cost. The Imperium, the symbol of the Confederacy's might, was gone, its crew lost in the desperate gambit to turn the tide of the battle. But even as she mourned the loss, Sarah felt a glimmer of hope. The Dreadnoughts, once thought to be relics of a bygone era, had proven their worth, their crews fighting with a ferocity and determination that belied their years. Perhaps with the Dominion's forces in disarray, the Confederacy could yet prevail and secure a future for humanity in the stars. As the Dreadnoughts continued their pursuit, Sarah steeled herself for the battles to come. The road ahead would be long and arduous, but with the might of the ancient warships at their backs, the Terran Confederacy might just have a chance to survive this ordeal. The triumph of the Dreadnoughts over the Kyloth Dominion's invasion force marked a pivotal turning point in the history of the galaxy. The once formidable Dominion, its command structure shattered and its fleets in disarray, was forced to retreat, its dreams of conquest and subjugation dealt a devastating blow. As the battered but victorious Dreadnought fleets returned to the core worlds of the Terran Confederacy, they were greeted with a mixture of relief, awe, and profound sorrow. The loss of the TCS Imperium, the Confederacy's beloved flagship, had left an indelible mark on the hearts of the people, a reminder of the heavy price paid for their survival. Yet, even in the midst of this grief, a sense of hope and renewed determination began to take root. The Dreadnoughts, long relegated to the annals of history, had once again proven their worth, their crews fighting with a ferocity and skill that had stunned even the mightiest of the Kyloth's warships. Dr. Sarah Johnson, who had been instrumental in coordinating the Dreadnought's involvement in the battle, stood alongside President Alec Rains as they welcomed the returning fleet. Her eyes were filled with a mixture of pride and sorrow, but her resolve had only been strengthened by the events of the past weeks. "The Confederacy owes a debt of gratitude to the crews of the Dreadnoughts," she said, her voice carrying a weight of authority. "Their bravery and sacrifice have saved us from utter annihilation. Now we must honor their legacy by rebuilding our forces and ensuring that the Kyloth Dominion never again threatens our way of life." Rains nodded in agreement, his expression grim but determined. "Dr. Johnson is right. The path ahead will not be an easy one, but we have been given a second chance, and we must make the most of it. The Dreadnoughts have shown us that with unity, courage, and the indomitable spirit of humanity, even our greatest challenges can be overcome." As the Dreadnoughts docked at the Confederacy's shipyards, their crews were greeted with cheers and celebrations. The people, who had once viewed these ancient warships as relics of a bygone era, now saw them as symbols of hope, the embodiment of humanity's resolve and resilience. Among the Dreadnought crews, a sense of renewed purpose had taken hold. They had witnessed firsthand the devastation wrought by the Kyloff Dominion, and they were more determined than ever to ensure that such a threat would never again arise. "We will not rest until the Kyloff have been driven from the galaxy," declared Captain Thomas Farga, the former commander of the ill-fated Imperium. "Our victory was hard-won, but it is only the beginning. The Confederacy can count on the Dreadnoughts to stand beside them, no matter the cost." As the Confederacy's leaders began the arduous task of rebuilding and reorganizing their forces, they turned to the Dreadnoughts for guidance and expertise. Under the leadership of Dr. Sarah Johnson, who had been appointed as the Confederacy's new Director of Strategic Operations, a new era of cooperation and innovation began to take shape. The Dreadnoughts, with their advanced technologies and battle-hardened crews, were integrated seamlessly into the Confederacy's military structure, their vast knowledge and experience serving as a force multiplier for the beleaguered human forces. Together, they began to devise new strategies and tactics, drawing upon the Dreadnought's formidable capabilities to counter the Kyloff's relentless advances. Meanwhile, the Confederacy's diplomatic corps, led by President Rains, reached out to the other galactic powers, forging new alliances and strengthening existing ties. The Kyloff Dominion, once seen as an unstoppable juggernaut, was now viewed with a newfound sense of trepidation, as the combined might of the Confederacy and its Dreadnought allies made it clear that further aggression would be met with swift and decisive retribution. As the reconstruction effort continued, Sarah Johnson watched with a mixture of pride and cautious optimism. The Confederacy had been through a crucible of fire, but it had emerged stronger and more united than ever before. With the Dreadnoughts at their side, she knew that the human species had a fighting chance to not only repel the Kyloff invasion, but to forge a lasting peace that would secure their place in the stars. "This is just the beginning," she said, her gaze fixed on the towering silhouettes of the Dreadnoughts as they underwent extensive repairs and upgrades. "The galaxy has seen the true power of humanity, and they will never underestimate us again." As the Confederacy and the Dreadnoughts prepared for the battles to come, a new era of interstellar cooperation and unity began to take shape. The once feared Dreadnoughts, long relegated to the shadows of history, had now become beacons of hope, their crews and technologies serving as the foundation for a future where humanity's destiny among the stars would not be determined by the whims of its enemies, but by the indomitable spirit that had driven it to the stars in the first place.